Okay, so let's start. It's 11:01. So, hello. I'm François-René Rideau, and I'm a one-man think tank from France. And you may or may not know me for my song "And the Pony," which I'm going to sing now. And let's go. End of all wars. I want the end of all wars, and then a trip to the stars. And a pony. You want a minimum pay. I want a minimum pay, $2 trillion a day. And a pony. Who doesn't like a pony? So cute, natural, and cuddly. You want universal love. I want universal love. And a pony. Healthcare for all. I want free healthcare for all, and that's in permanent stall. And a pony. You want all children in schools. I want all children in schools that cram genius into fools. And a pony. Who doesn't like a pony? So cute, natural, and cuddly. If you don't care for a ride, you can cook it, hear me hide. Serve with honey. Thank you, Marcus. So, everyone loves this song because it can be read on many levels. At the first level, it's just wishful thinking. It's what like your typical idiotic conservative will expect from God, or what your typical idiotic liberal will expect as a miracle from the state. I mean, maybe God can give miracle, but miracle from the state, wow. But so at the second level, it's just us libertarians like mocking the idiots of the idiotic statists. And at the third level, it's libertarians who actually believe they can make it happen through technology. And we call them extropians, like transhumanists. Yes, we want so much technology that in the future, you'll be sorry that what today would cost $2 trillion, you can just spend in a day, you know? Or we want to be so rich that free healthcare will have robots that will do, like, so cheap that everyone got a robot that's his doctor or something. So technology can make it happen, hopefully in the future. But today I'm going to tell you about, Today I'm going to tell you about civil obedience. And I'll try to convince you, like me, to become cheese-eating surrender monkeys. So, and thank you. Okay, much better. Much better. So it's of course easy to misunderstand the idea of what it means to be civil obedience. And if you don't understand properly the idea, then you will fail to obey when you should, and that will lead to direct consequences. But it's also easy to understand the idea, and actually most of you obey the state most of the time. How many people here have taken a gun and shot a bureaucrat? Raise your hand. No one? So you already get the idea of civil obedience, and it's just that you're not totally conscious about it. You still fantasize about doing it, but you're not doing it, and it may lead, if you take your fantasy too seriously, to some trouble. And I hope to convince you that you don't have to fantasize about it, or you don't have to be ashamed of not living by that fantasy. Maybe we need it a slightly bit less. I think there's too much echo or something.
No, it's good.
It's good?
Good.
Okay.
You can usually tell if you're behind the speaker, and since you're behind it, you can't tell how loud it is. Yeah. It's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So now, does everyone understand what a cheese-eating surrender monkey is? Okay, it's a French guy. That's a joke from The Simpsons, and it's popular since the Iraq War. Okay, so as a Frenchman, I know very well the blessings of unconditional surrender. And I mean, which warring country in Europe suffered least during World War II? Okay, France. Okay, And what's the country, the opposite of surrender? What's the country that never surrenders? Even against the worst of like the Russian armies bombing them for 20 years, they still never surrender. You know that country? It's called Chechnya. And do you know the difference between Paris and Grozny? Grozny is just a pile of rubble, and Paris is like the capital of luxurious life. So in which city do you think you'll have the most chances of accomplishing your life and living freely and accomplishing yourself? I think Paris. But, I mean, you're free to move to Grozny if you think Grozny is a better place than Paris, of course. So that's the argument in a crux. I mean, the proof, okay. At least a hint that there may be something good about surrender. Okay. But it's also interesting to consider that France has not always had a tradition of surrender, or it has had also a tradition of fighting and winning. Up till 60 years ago, France had an empire that spanned the entire world. France used to have an army that conquered all of Europe, and everyone was afraid of. Not anymore. But so France has not always been only a surrender country, but I'll argue that France has been a country of surrender for longer than France existed, and that's a tradition we are proud of, actually. So let me tell you about the origin of France. My name is François. I told you that, and François is an old French word that means French. From back when the word French used to mean German. Okay. What is he talking about? Okay. Have you heard of the Franks? The Franks is a coalition of German tribes that in the 5th or 6th century conquered the western part of the Roman Empire. Okay, so they did all the killing, the raping, the plundering, all the fun stuff, you know. Not very respectful of the principle of non-aggression, but nonetheless very fun for the survivors and victors. And the name Frank, actually, we don't know exactly what it means, but the main thing we think it means is axe. Those Franks used to have something much like a tomahawk, like it's an axe that you can either use to cleave the cranium of your enemy, or you can throw at him, and it's a very versatile weapon. And so the axe was their like token weapon, and they took the name of the axe, and so it's essentially the axe gang. Imagine that the axe gang took over this country Gaul, and that the modern word in French for French is axe. And the country is the axe country, you know? We are the axis of evil. Okay, so that's exactly what happens. And we're all proud. And the word not only is the name of the country, it's we're all Franks, but it also means honest, it means free, it means someone who speaks his mind freely and is not afraid. It means all those good things. I mean, speak frankly, you know, it's the same thing in English. And disenfranchised, to give someone the right to be a first-class citizen, disenfranchised. Enfranchised, sorry, the opposite. Disenfranchised is not giving them the right of being first-class citizens. So, and so what happens is exactly that. So you must understand that. So how did the Franks become the kingdom of the Franks? The story is also interesting. The king of the Franks, a guy with a lovely name of Chlodwig, who is now worshipped as Louis the First, or Louis, or Clovis, or whatever the name you use. So very nice name. I mean, he's like the king of fables, you know. He's a great king, etc. Except he was just the kind of guy who would kill everyone in the city that didn't like him enough. So he's more of an ogre, but the fairy tales tell that it's a great hero who kills the ogre, but in practice it's more like the ogre who becomes king. So how did the Franks become kings? Because they were mainly a group of roaming bandits, and they became kings instead of just roaming bandits when Chlodwig became Louis by converting to Catholicism. And so he allied with the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church, if you know the end of the Roman Empire, had replaced the Roman civil administration as basically the totalitarian bureaucracy. So they would force you to think like you should, and take your money and tell you what to do. and you could not move from one place to the other. You could not leave your job. You could not choose the price at which you sell stuff. It was totally a totalitarian regime. And so it's no surprise that even back when Rome was a free country and the soldiers would conquer the neighboring countries and have lots of slaves if they win, millions of people enrolled in the Roman army. But by the time being a Roman citizen just meant you are a slave to the system, not even 10,000 people would fight for the Roman Empire, and most of them were actually Germans. So, I mean, a lot of Roman citizens greeted the Germans as liberators.
People probably don't know the change between the Principate and the Dominate in Roman history.
Yeah, okay, but that's not exactly the thing. Yes, there are many things. But
They froze things and said you could no longer change.
yes, so yes, there was a savior of the Roman Empire who saved it by making it even more totalitarian and etc. Now in the kingdom of the Franks, the word Frank, of course, means first-class citizen. I mean, we are the Franks, they are the Romans. The Romans now mean slave, and Frank means free and first-class citizen. And it's interesting that why did people call themselves Romans before? Not because they had any one drip of blood from Roman origin. They called themselves Roman because Roman used to mean first-class citizen in the Roman Empire. So everyone in France was Roman, but now Roman means slave, because the Franks are the masters, the master race, and the Romans are the slaves. And you know the word slave. Do you know where the word slave comes from? Slav, exactly. The word slaves come from Slav, because after having enslaved the Romans, where do we get new slaves? Where we have to go further east and take Slavs. And so the word Slav now means slave. But what does the word Slav mean in Slav? Well, the only words that are related to Slav in Slavic languages are Slava and Slobda, which means Slava is glory and Sloboda is freedom. So the same story happens over and over again. Okay, so, and of course, now Frank means honest. Why does Frank mean honest? Because the Franks are the master race, they bear weapons, and if I tell you, hey, you're ugly, you know, yeah, and so are you. You know, we're both armed men, and if you want to go further, we can get it further. But I dare to speak what I think. Now, imagine that you're the Frank, and you tell me, hey, you're ugly, and I'm the Roman who has no weapon. Oh yes, sir, I'm ugly, and you're beautiful, sir, and you're nice, etc. So the Romans are the people who always lie, or always ready to say anything to save their skin, like they have like no dignity. And so the Franks are the people who are honest, who have dignity, who speak their mind. So that's where the word Franks comes from. So axis, remember, this is the axis of evil. And so after a few centuries of domination by the master race, everyone was Frank. At first, all the Germans who are not part of the franchise said, oh, I'm Frank. I mean, I'm German, I'm a free man, I'm Frank. And my son, I call him Frank. You know, that's why people call their sons Frank. And after a few centuries, not just the Germans, but everyone, including people who had not one drip of German blood, says, I'm Frank. And so after a few centuries, instead of being the kingdom of the Franks, of the master race, it's the kingdom of France, because everyone's a Frank. But it's still very clear who is the master race and who isn't. The master race, we call them nobles, because they have noble blood. Why do they have noble blood? Because they are descendants of the master race. And the other ones are the commoners. That's the nobles and the commoners. So everyone is Frank, but the difference is still clear between those who bear weapons and those who don't. But as you see, the words are still slowly corrupted by constant lies. And this race-based aristocracy was ended like 2 centuries ago, about, with the French Revolution. So it lasted like for 15 centuries. That's a lot. That's a lot. It works. So we could say that in Nietzschean terms, the slave morality of lies has replaced the master morality of force. Now people don't base power on brute force like Clovis. It's not like a matter of cleaving your skull with an axe. It's a matter of lying better to you. So it's it's still a progress. I mean, I prefer being lied to than being cut in two and cut in half. It's progress, not uniform progress, but it's progress. And but now the master is who can lie the best and defraud people the best. And robbery and murder have been displaced by fraud at the top of the most profitable crimes. Okay, and that's where I need to sing you another song soon. Because the story of France thus perfectly illustrates the nature of the state. The state is born when the roaming bandits decide to be stationary bandits and stay there and enslave you on a permanent basis instead of having to kill you every year, and you're poor every year and there's less and less to steal every year. So we are libertarian, which means that we understand this reality. We understand that the state is our enemy and we face it. And if we want to win, it's important to know the enemy. And so here's my second song that describes this enemy we face. It's based, the first third of the song is based on a poem by William Auden, a British-born poet who wrote this after the Soviet invaded Czechoslovakia in August '68. That's the name of his thing. Here it goes. The ogre does what ogres can, it's quite impossible to man. But one prize is beyond his reach, the ogre cannot master speech. About a subjugated plain, among its desperate and slain, the ogre talks with hand on hips, while drivel gushes from his lips. So, the ogre is pure force. He cannot speak, he cannot lie. But what William Auden forgot to add is what happens afterwards. And what happens afterwards is that, and that I wrote, a midget comes forward and greets, "Great king, oh let me sing your feats." The ogre, flattered in a stir, creates the dwarf his minister. Now dwarfs are dukes while ogres reign, and while the conquered scream in vain, atop the rotting flesh and flies, a dwarf will laugh at man's demise. And that's the priest, the intelligentsia, the talking class, and you have all these people who will always justify everything that the power does. And even though power, you have to submit to power, but power is always held by a lot of liars. And the end game is that today is noble who bears sign of blood from ogre midget line. Will mark our jail who'll dare to tell our founding ogre wasn't swell. At school when children learn to read the midget's holy words, their creed, the lesson taught follows the lead of every savior ogre's deed. And that's the end of the song. But so yeah, the end game is that in the end everyone is taught to love the ogre and think that the ogre is the rightful king. And that's what we have to fight. We don't have to fight just the ogre, we have to fight the midget. And what I will be arguing is that you should totally and always surrender to the ogre. The ogre is stronger than you are. Otherwise, he would not be the ogre. Otherwise, you would be the ogre. On the other hand, the midget is no ogre. You should never, ever surrender to the midget. You should never surrender to the lies. You should never believe them. Maybe the ogre will force you to repeat the lies. Yes, okay, I have to repeat the lies. But don't believe it 1 minute. Surrender to the ogre, don't surrender to the midget. I think that's my main thing. So the ogre is a personification here of brute force, and you should submit to it unless you're stronger. If you're stronger, don't submit, of course. But if you're not, yes, please do. Don't fight to lose, fight to win. Okay, so what else? Okay, and so if we go back to France, I want to tell you everything about French surrender. France had a long tradition of surrender. In the prehistory, our Paleolithic Neanderthal men surrendered to the modern Homo sapiens of Cro-Magnon, and then they left their space to the Basques and the Celts, and then the Romans, and then the Germans. We let the Norman came, and so we adopted the laws of the Romans and the language. We adopted the name of the Germans. When the Norman came, we gave them a province, Normandy, and then they came back to claim the kingdom. And so we allied with both the Norman, now kings of England, and with both the German, now king of France. We were on both sides of the fight, and we applauded whoever won. In the end, the succession, we had a king from Navarre, which is halfway between France and Spain. We had the first communist dictatorship after the revolution. It was the Red Terror, the Revolutionary Terror. We held a Corsican midget. I was emperor. The Russians brought back the king. We greeted the king. We had another king when we were not very happy with this one. We had another republic which was quickly followed by another Corsican midget as our new emperor. The Germans came, we let them win again, and we had a republic. But the Germans came twice more, and we were like greeting them. We were ready to greet them, but unhappily, the Anglo-Americans threw them out twice. So instead, we have an Anglo-American-backed regime, puppet regime. We were ready right now to greet our Arabic invaders, and we would proudly surrender to them if only they had a master to whose feet we could grovel. But they don't. So that's a problem. So in the meantime, we grovel at the feet of the Belgian masters in Brussels, and we are... During the Cold War, we were eagerly waiting for the Russians to come again, but it didn't happen. Maybe it's still time for them to come. Russians, if there's any Russian here, please come. And okay, so we have a proud history of surrender. Of course, you'll tell me each of the invaders himself has a proud history of killing people and being an invader and winning, but we survived, they didn't. I mean, all the French aristocracy died in the French Revolution, World War I, World War II, they're all dead. Now there's only us surrenderers, and we're proud of it. We're traitors, we're surrenderers, we're turncoats, and yeah, yes we are. I mean, there are resistors. I mean, we like to remember Vercingetorix who resisted Caesar's army. We like to remember like resistors like Jean Moulin who resisted Hitler, but they are dead. You know, in French, in Latin, there's a saying, "Vae victis," shame to the victims, shame to the losers. Like the losers, ha! Vae victis. So we're not descendants from the losers. We're descendants from the survivors. We're not descendants from the winners either, because the winners of one day is a loser of the next day, you know. So we're proud descendant from a line of cowards, and I'm a coward. But the important thing is that we know that in France that power must be respected. I mean, if there are the stronger, there are the stronger. That's a tautology. So we must respect that power where there is. But we also know that powerless is to be trampled upon. If someone is not powerful, well, hey, that's what we should take advantage of it. So we know to take advantage of power and powerlessness. And most importantly, we know the difference between the two. We know which line to walk and which line not to walk. We know that what matters is not what the law says, it's what the law enforcement officer does. Whatever the law says, it's only ever forbidden but to get caught. It's the getting caught that's forbidden. It's not the doing the thing. I mean, you can smoke as much as you want as long as you don't get caught. You don't do it in front of a police officer, you know. And if they say that something is forbidden but they don't enforce it, in practice, it's not forbidden. If they don't say it's forbidden but in practice they enforce it, it is forbidden. So that's the law that matters. And so in France we have like great proverbs like pour vivre heureux, vivez caché, like to live happy, live hidden, or cultiver son jardin, to grow one's own garden. That we will gladly pay taxes on everything that we can't hide. So the important bit also is that we would not confuse surrender with victory or subservience with freedom. We know that of course it's better to win, of course it's better to be free, but there's a price tag attached to it, and we know not to neglect the price tag. The price tag to win is to follow military discipline, to always be on the top of violence. That means that you yourself should be trained in violence, always do it. It's expensive, I mean, and it's also expensive on your soul. You have to become a hardened killer if you want to be on top always. And will you be on top always? I mean, the best regime lasts a few hundred years. That's not too bad, but they didn't survive forever. I mean, so I actually say that Mars is a harsher master than Caesar. And Caesar, the great general, he's a harsh master. I mean, just because you're the victor in Caesar's army doesn't mean you're free. You just mean that you're a slave soldier of a victorious army. That doesn't make you a free man or happy man. You know, you have to obey just as much as a soldier as you have to obey as a conquered, and you risk your life about as much because okay, you have a weapon, but you are sent where other people have weapons too. So it's risky. I mean, you get to do, yes, the killing, the plundering, the raping. That's fun. If you survive, but you get also hit not just by the enemy, but first and foremost by your own officer. I mean, your first enemy when you're a soldier is not the guy in the other camp. The main enemy is the officer. If you don't obey, he kills you or he gets you killed. So yes, freedom is good, victory is good, but there's a very hefty price tag attached to it, and we do not neglect the price tag. So yes, if we can win cheaply, we do it, and that's why the French have had in the past colonial empires, etc. But if winning is too expensive, we'd rather surrender quickly. And it's better to surrender quickly than sometimes than to win, and half the population is dead, and the survivors are much worse off than if they had surrendered. That's not a great victory to be had. So yes, victory is good, but don't neglect the price tag. And so that's why as a permanent relationship to power, we choose surrender. And again, I don't mean a half-hearted surrender with the spirit of revenge, where you know the moment the guy has his back turned, you stab him in the back. I don't mean I mean a wholehearted surrender, where you enthusiastically welcome the victor as your new liberator. You know, if you vanquish the current regime, he's of course better. I mean, hello New German, hello Nazi regime, hello American liberators. The Americans are liberators, the Nazis were liberators. Everyone is a liberator. I mean, when we surrender to the Arabs will be liberators, or whoever. I mean, please come invite us. You will be our liberators. And we don't mean either like hit and run guerrilla tactics. No, what we mean is that we will actively staff your bureaucracy. Please, I'm here. I will serve you. And we will lobby your office. And we will sell you our wines, our perfumes, and even our daughters. Please. We want to be part of the master race too, you know? There's no reason why we should not be having a good time. So, power is a fact, and we'll make most of it, and power has its limits, and we'll also make the most of it. So, how many of you has a farm or something, whatever? When you have a farm, you don't put your grain, you don't try to kill all the rodents who could possibly eat your grain. That's not possible. There are too many rodents. What you do is you put your grain out of reach of the rodents. You hide it. You put it on top of on the granaries, like away from the ground, etc. You put it out of reach of the rodents. And the same in France. We put our riches out of reach of the government. We don't try to kill all the government goons. There will be always someone else to come. So also in France, we are well warned by the media that you should never flaunt your riches. There's a story told in school that there was this minister of Louis XIV who showed off his castle to the king. Stupid, stupid man. Of course, he was very soon killed by the king and all his wealth confiscated. Don't do that. We also told the story of a guy who dared to shoot the two bureaucrats who ruined his business. Well, the guy is serving the maximum sentence life. I mean, if there were still like a death sentence in France, he would have had it. I mean, a petty murderer only gets like 7 years in jail. But this guy, he dared to kill two bureaucrats. Of course, he'll get the maximum sentence. He'll never be pardoned either, or whatever. I mean, we're told these stories. Don't ignore that. So, our motto in the end is, long live our masters, but longer shall we live. So, I've been asked often to clarify what I mean. So what I mean is that, yes, for cowardice, but no to stupidity. So it's very important to identify the enemy, and It's also important to understand who the enemy is, but also what the enemy is or what is the correct strategy to deal with the enemy. There's an English proverb that says, "He who fights and runs away lives to fight another day." Well, he who doesn't even fight and runs away, he lives even better. And if you run ahead of the fight, you can have a much better life. And that's what I did here. I know that France is going to shit, so I moved to the US. And I promised you that by the time shit hits the fan in the US, I will have left. Okay, sometimes you really cannot run away. Sometimes you've made a mistake, you didn't run away on time. Sometimes there's no further place to run away. Sometimes you must fight. That's true. I'm not denying that. And in those times, you must just commit to fight the best you can, etc. But before that time comes, you should prepare. That's why you can run away a whole lot and prepare before you cannot run away, and then you are prepared and can fight. And when you are prepared, then you should use commitment to fight. If you know you have to fight to the death, fight to the death. And by all means, fight as well as you can and do it well. But once again, the point is fight to win. Don't fight to lose. Don't fight the state at its top while you are at unprepared. Fight the state when it's weak and you are strong. And I like to tell the story of my family. My great-grandfather was a war hero. He was a captain, an officer in the colonial army. He was far away in Vietnam. And this stupid man, he chose to come back to France to fight World War I. And of course, he died. And what did that do? What good did that do to France? None. What good did that do to his family? None. I mean, his family had to live without a man. This guy is a successful hero, and I hate him for that. My grandfather is an unsuccessful hero, because he was also an officer in the colonial army. So when the Germans come to France, he crosses the Mediterranean Sea and he goes fight the German. But by the time he arrives in France, the French have already surrendered. So too bad for him. And then when the Americans invade, he crosses enemy lines and goes to the American side and enrolls and says, "I want to fight again." But by the time he's ready to fight and they have trained him, etc., the Germans have surrendered. So he's a failed hero. He tried twice to cross enemy lines to fight, and twice he failed. He's a failed hero. My father is a failed anti-hero. He did not want to fight, but he was enrolled by force and sent to Algeria for domestic security events or whatever. Of course, he chose, but I mean, if you have to be sent to war, he chose the most safest place to be at war is among paratroopers. No one wants to fuck with paratroopers. So he was maybe at the safest place on the front. Except he was computing where the artillery should shoot. So he was, every time he says, "Please shoot here," he was, "Oh, please let it not be the place where I am, because I hope I made the calculations correctly." So it's good to be good at math. So my father is a failed anti-hero, but I'm a successful anti-hero. I ran away from war, managed to dodge the draft. I'm here in the US, and once again, I will not be here when shit hits the fan. So, of course, I'm willing to fund those who will fight for me. If someone will fight for me and will win at it, fighting is a specialized skill. I believe in division of labor. I prefer to be good at earning money and pay it to someone who is good at fighting for me. So if someone will fight for me and efficiently and win, I will pay him. I'm ready to pay him. But and if shit hits the fan and there's no other thing, I'm ready to learn the skills to fight. But I'd rather not. I'd rather have someone else do it for me. But I also believe that corruption works. I believe that we should never embargo the countries we don't like. I believe that capitalism is this great corrupting force that will turn everyone into a capitalist. And that's about how it works in France, that we turn everyone into a French guy because We will accept any master who will give us a good life, like long vacations, like love and pretty women. And the moment another master comes who offers us an even better deal, that's the master we'll choose. You know, we're not stupid, and that's the strategy I advocate. So it's also important point. It's a tautological point that justice cannot win against the interest of the mighty. If the mighty wants injustice, you will have injustice. That's the definition of mighty. Whatever the mighty wants is what's going to happen. So if you want justice and prosperity, etc., to happen, you have to convince the mighty that it is in their own interest. And that's where, once again, capitalism comes to play. And that's where our ideas are very useful, because our ideas are about win-wins. They are not about win-lose. They are not about fighting. They're about like negotiating and finding an agreeable solution for everyone. It's about peace, not war. So I believe that non-violence and surrender is a rational way to express our libertarian message of non-violence. We do not fight and lose, because that's stupid and evil. We only fight and win. And we even try to not fight, because fighting in general is a win-lose situation at best, and most often a lose-lose strategy. Our goal as libertarians is to minimize violence. So if you fight in such a way that in the end it leads to decreased violence, if you have a mass killer, a serial killer, you take him down, yes, that's good, that decreases overall violence. So you introduce violence, but you actually decrease overall violence. But if your fight will only increase violence, if you're start shooting police officers and then they shoot you back and they continue being just as violent or even more violent because now they are scared, that's not helpful, you know? Don't do something that will only increase violence. And that's why you should also not vie for violent revolution. Violent revolution does not work. Violent revolution only means that the most violent contestant gets on top, and then you have introduced violence as a legitimate way to change regime. And it's not good. You have only increased violence in the world. So I don't believe in violent revolution, only in peaceful evolution. And yes, it's important. Okay. So by definition, the state is on top of violence, and violence feeds the state. Every time you introduce violence that's not going to win and decrease and vanquish the bureaucrats, you're only making justifying more violence on their side. You should not do that. Of course, if the current state collapses, by all means, get power. I mean, hopefully you will be a better state than the current state, but you will still be a state, because if you win power against them, you have still used violence to get on top. So it's possible that you do better, but you're still the state, you're still the man. Now you are the ogre, hopefully a better ogre. So yes, don't challenge the state when it's at its top. So yes, you should relinquish any form of violence or armed resistance. Do not resist. Do not, even like Larkin Rose, what he said, like I could have taken the 15 government goons with my AR-15. He didn't do it. He knew the message of civil obedience, because he knew that he could have fought and won this particular battle, but he would have lost the war, and it would not have been pretty. So superior force is to be respected, but inferior reason isn't. Don't believe the state is your friends. Don't believe the lies of the midgets. Don't lose your soul to greater evil. Don't help or support the state, and don't promote violent solutions. And once again, yes, sometimes violence is necessary, but that's rare, and only if it decreases overall violence. If your solution increases violence, it's not a solution. So my conclusion is about what should you do if you don't like the system. Because once again, I don't confuse surrender and victory. So what the situation, I don't confuse obedience and freedom. What should you do if you want to be more free, if you have understood this lesson? Well, the first thing is the thing we're doing here, teaching the ideas of liberty. Teaching people that there are win-win strategies when they only see the win-lose or lose-lose strategy. We should teach people to cooperate and find ways to cooperate that are more efficient. And the problem is that, of course, most people don't care. You can never win the majority. The majority of people will believe the lies of the midgets of the world because these people are professionals who are trained and well-funded, and you are not professionals. You're not well-trained. You're not well-funded. You'll never compete with the propagandists of the state with the mass of people. I mean, the ogres hire midgets because midgets work or efficient. So don't expect to win against them and win the mass of people to you. But still, you can make things better. I mean, if you teach people around you to be free, if you surround yourself with free people, you can probably be more effective and happier, and that's what matters. Yourself be more effective and happier. So you can convince people around you, and you can surround yourself with people who care and can be convinced, and avoid people who don't care and can't be convinced. And you might even turn a few enemies into allies. That's the best thing you can do. You find someone who would otherwise support the state and do lots of evil things, and you convince him to stop, and that's one of the best things you can do. But you should never hope for victory. You should only hope to make yourself comfortable and to keep the flame alive. Maybe someday you can vanquish ogres, but only when the ogres have collapsed because they overate or whatever, you know. Don't fight the ogre at its top, once again. But keeping the flame alive is background work, and it's uncertain. So uncertain future. Don't expect victory now, or don't fight for short-term gains. Just look for the long term. Another thing you can do is create what they call temporary autonomous zones. What is a temporary autonomous zone? It's anything that's under the radar of the state. You know, where people can live free. Something like PorcFest. Like people trade, there's Agora Valley, etc. You can create zones like that where you can avoid the taxes and the regulations, and where you don't have to feed the beast. But don't do it at your own sacrifice. That's the bad thing to do. Sacrifice means that, not to pay taxes, I will have no revenues. No, that's stupid. No. Be prosperous. Hide the taxes you don't have to pay because it's not enforced or badly enforced, but don't sacrifice yourself. That's not the goal. The goal is for everyone to win. The goal is not for everyone to lose. Sacrificing yourself to hurt the state is a lose-lose trade. Don't use lose-lose. Use win-win, you know? So win as much as you can, and if you have to pay taxes, well, and you have to pay taxes. Submit to the ogre. Don't submit to the midget. And there is H.L. Hunt who famously said, if this country can be saved, it can be saved at a profit. and Patrick Friedman recently had the variant, this country can only be saved if it can be saved at a profit. And it's not just for this country, it's also for yourself and everything you hold dear. It can only be saved if it can be saved at a profit. If it's not, otherwise it's not sustainable, and you can feed your strategy, and the strategy will kill you, and then you'll have nothing. So be sustainable, have a profit. Profits is about the discipline of sustainability. And remember, any temporary autonomous zone is temporary. The man will catch up with it eventually. So don't invest all you have in a temporary autonomous zone. Don't put all your money, everything in it, and have a plan to cash in and get away before the establishment catches up. On the other hand, the establishment is slow and bulky. So you can be fast and nimble and be there before and have left before it comes. Don't expect to, if you do something that's not clearly legal, move within the year or within 2 years max. You know, don't stay where you are. Don't be a sitting duck. These guys are slow, but eventually they catch up. But they are slow, so hey, be nimble. Okay, and the main thing and the third thing that really changes the game is finding technologies that improve incentives. You should find new technologies, things like Bitcoins, for instance. That's perfect technology that changes the game because it makes it easier to do transactions with a lower transaction cost, for instance. Maybe Bitcoin is not there yet, but maybe other technologies such as that will allow people to trade in safer ways and without having to pay the taxes, and that's good. Cryptography in general makes for more privacy, so that changes the incentives. Now you can, there are all kinds of technologies that change the game. If you want to change the game, work on the technology. Don't work on trying to get power. Don't lobby the state. Don't try to be, oh, please state, be less bad on me. They don't care. They will be bad on you if it's in their interest, and they won't be that's their interest. So what you have to do is change what their interest is, change the game, change the incentives. I like seasteading, for instance, because seasteading improves the incentives on local government, because you have a ship that can move from one city to the other, and that's and then if the local government is bad, you can move. Anything that makes black market easier and more reliable is good, and everything that increases also the accountability of government official is good. That's why I like Coblock or the Peaceful Trade Project, because they work towards making government more accountable. So anything that changes the incentives is good. Any technology that can be like purely object technology or human technology is good. But the main goal for you should be to survive. The state is mortal, so are you, but you can survive it. In Russia, everyone who survived communism won. Everyone who was still there in 1989 alive won. Everyone who was killed by the state lost. And the horror of communism is indeed that 100 million people lost, you know? That's horrible. But still, many million people won by surviving. And I invite you to win by surviving. Don't lose by dying. So when shit hits the fan, be prepared, or either by living in a state where the shit is less, or by being very far away. Don't be in New York City the day the shit hits the fan. You know, have an escape plan. Move ahead. Of course, as long as the shit hasn't hit the fan, New York City is a perfectly fine place to live, and I'm moving there. So, but yes, don't be there when the things get bad. And yes, vote with your feet. That's the same thing. I voted with my feet. That's the only vote that matters in the end. That's the only vote that's effective. And so the First Aid Project is only indeed one way to do it. There are other ways. I invite you to find a way that suits you. But I suppose that that's all I had to say. So thank you. And now I will take questions.
Well, I don't know if this is a question. It's more like supportive testimony, which is that I'm a first generation, born in the United States. My father's family were generations of cowards, extreme cowards, which is the reason they survived. My grandfather, noticing that all of his brothers, had died in the German army in the First World War, decided he did not want to join them. And managed to get a friend of his to help him pretend to be blind for a while. It's a pharmacist who gave him some ointment that he put in his eyes that made them like swell up and no longer function for a while. And mysteriously, the ailment went away when he was kicked out of the army. And then Hitler came to power, and he decided this doesn't look like a good idea, so he and the family, fled. Unfortunately, he sent my father to Germany, from Germany to France, which turned out to be a bad idea. But then, but my father surrendered repeatedly in there. First, the French said that if he wanted to stay, he had to join the French army, so he did. And as soon as the Germans came and conquered, he pretended no longer to have anything to do with the French army. And he worked under false papers for a while, and when the heat got too high, he became an illegal immigrant to Switzerland, which luckily, was a little tolerant of illegal immigration at that very moment. He literally walked over the border in the night, and then he came to the United States, and my family, and actually there are lots and lots of stories going back a very long time. My father's family were cowards. My mother's family were very, very brave, and in fact they became ogres. I have an uncle who was one of the founders of modern urban terrorism during the, he fought the British to found Israel. And he and other members of my family became amazing badass ogres. And as a result of that, my family members who are still there live in no peace whatsoever, constantly watching their back because there might be a bigger and badder ogre down the block. And I've got a friend in New York who's a Palestinian, and the two of us, both can revel in the fact that because we're here, in New York, Ahmed and I can sit down and have dinner, and I can, tickle his baby and what have you, and we get to be, and we get to be friends because we're cowards. We're far away from the fight, and we have nothing to do with it. And I've got to say that I'm a big believer when, from watching what's happened on both sides of my family, and the idea that if you cannot win, don't die. It just seems like the wrong move.
Okay. Well, thank you. And sure. More questions? Or remarks or anything? One? Yes, two, three. Bye. Okay.